Welcome to another wonderful episode of Write and Shine, Shining Through Your Words, author series, proudly brought to you by Write and Shine Media House. My name is Magriet, and I'm absolutely delighted to bring you not only incredible books, but incredible authors from around the globe. Dawn, I'm so excited to have you here. Please, will you introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Dawn Elgin, and I'm the founder and creator of Practical Spiritualism, which is really an empowerment company. We focus on helping people find their own power, their own center, and how to reestablish that to find all of their needs within themselves. And yeah, it's pretty much
That's a
the baseline of what
mouthful.
I do. Yeah.
That's a mouthful. It's amazing. Please, can you unpack a little bit, more about exactly that? Because it sounds like a whole process. And also, who are the people that's your ideal people to work with?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, it is a process. We're just finishing up getting it trademarked is the self-sovereignty system. And so it's about really first step is creating awareness. Who am I? Question that many of us ask and don't really get an answer. We identify as our ego. I'm a woman. I'm, almost 50 years old. I'm, a mom, all those things, even color and where we are, but we don't really think about like, no, who am I? That's
Yes,
your experience right now, but who are you?
yes.
And so awareness becomes the first. So both awareness of who you are underneath those identities, as well as what forms those identities. So what are the beliefs that are really driving those things? And our beliefs are mostly gained before the age of 8.
Yes.
And so once we understand what our beliefs are, it's our beliefs that drive our programming. Our programming is a combination of our beliefs, and it's our programming that creates our thoughts, which drives our emotions, which drives our actions, which creates our habits and patterns and moods, and then really creates our personality and defines our destiny. So if we want to change, we want to go back to the beginning, right?
Agree,
So
agree.
yeah, so the steps for the system are really awareness and then heal, release, and reclaim. And
Oh,
so
beautiful.
yeah, so we want to really heal the wounds, reclaim our power, and step into it fully and completely again.
That's just incredible, like goosebumps. And you recently, published a book. Please, will you tell us more about that? Because that's something I definitely want to read.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's called Let Go or Be Dragged. And it
The
is a
title.
story of the system. Yeah. And it's really about, what holds us back from our
Yes,
power, from our greatness. And mostly it's our old wounds,
yes.
whether they're from this lifetime or past times, whether they're ours or generational. um, Really we've come here within contracts to try and release those pieces. And
Yes.
so in the book we talk about the principles of co-creation. We talk about who are you and what it means to be in co-creation with source, with the universe, with mother, father, god, source, whatever you want to use your term for it. um, and then how do we really come into alignment with ourselves? And then we go through the process. So that's kind of the first part of the book, is answering a lot of these big questions in a really practical way. Hence
Yes.
practical spiritualism. So how do we take these big huge ideas and bring them down into logical, bite-sized things that we can really apply to our own life? And
Yes.
then yeah, instead of kind of leaving it in that mystical way for us to figure out, which is great sometimes, but sometimes we just need application. And then how do we take these steps afterwards to really bring it all the way around? How do we take that information out and do the steps and processes to be able to create that? And in the book, I give worksheets and meditations on the hub and all those things to really allows me to do that. And then it's also available on our YouTube and our Facebook community as well.
Sounds incredible. And I do want to ask you, just out of curiosity as well, do you focus a lot on the ego versus soul? Because that's quite something, I'm very, very aware of at the moment is that ego.
Interesting. I do. I don't make him the bad guy as much as probably,
Okay,
so
interesting.
yeah. So this, well, because psyche and ego is part of our human experience, and that's
Yes.
the contract we signed into. So yes, we are a soul having a human experience. But we need that. It's just that it shouldn't be in the driving seat. It's
Yes.
meant to be something that we create with, like a tool or a paintbrush. It's not meant to be the painter. And
Okay.
so when we don't know who we are, hence the awareness. So we do talk about it within the awareness. You are the one that's aware. You are not your body. You're the one that's aware of the body, the one that was in there when it was born, then it
Wow.
had to figure out its toes. You were the one that was in there at, adolescence when you went through all those great changes. You were in there as you became an adult. And
Yes.
so that's who you are, is the one that's aware of these things, aware of thought, aware of emotion, who's the experiencer. And so ego's there, but we need to be able to actually shift and pivot. And
Yes.
so if you think about the role of even our nervous system, so we go through like sympathetic and parasympathetic. Everybody thinks sympathetic's bad, the stress response, and it's not.
Yes.
Naturally, we are meant to go between, it's do our sympathetic, we're in doing, driving phase, and then we go into B, spiritual, assess, kind of broad viewpoint, where am I going, back into do. And our whole day's like that, every 90 minutes to 2 hours, doobie
Yes.
doobie 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 doo. And so that's the cycle of life and one of our principles.
Yes.
So I think of our ego in the same way. We're in drive, we're in ego, and then we pull back and we go, oh, am I heading in the right direction? Oh, perfect. Okay, head back in.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So we should be able to pivot. We should be
Mhm.
able to pivot between our higher self and our human self.
Okay.
People say lower self, but I think of it more as like contained self,
Yes.
expand, contain, as opposed to this is something about you that's bad, but
Yes.
I do love the term ego edging God out.
Mhm.
If we think of God or source or universe, whatever your language is it expands and it individualizes. So we are an aspect of source. And so oneness expands and individualizes. And then we start to get aspects. We're an
Yes.
aspect of God, just like our personality is. We have aspects of personality. And so, and we're here so that life can experience itself. So we create and then we experience, right? And so, and even in there is do and be, right? So
Yes.
you do, you create, and then you be, you experience. And
It's so
so I
beautifully
think,
said.
like, yeah. So I think of God as, ego edging God out, but at the same time, yes, it's meant to. It's part of
Mhm.
this crazy, crazy contract that we agreed to come and do Earth,
And it's
right?
very interesting you mentioned the roles we have as well. I just recently became an empty nester. So
Mm.
brutal, brutal.
Oh, it's a doozy. Yes.
And as a single parent, my whole life revolved around this boy of mine. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting exercise and like exercise or experience to go through to really ask yourself, who am I? Without that role in my life. Like obviously I'm still his mom, but he's not my like whole focus of every day anymore.
Absolutely. And it is weird. It is
It
really weird. I
is.
was a single mom for a long time and then I married my husband. We became a blended family. One
Okay.
kid leaves, two kids leave, and then you're like, oh, this is weird. And
Very.
it is like phases and changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
And that's what I want to ask you. What made you pick up your pen to write this book?
Mm. So it's funny, you asked me my ideal client. My ideal client was me 10 years ago. So
Okay.
yeah. So somebody that has a life that on the outside looks phenomenal,
Yes.
and yet they feel slightly unfulfilled, kind of lost, not, and almost feel guilty or ashamed that they're not just more grateful for everything that they have. I had a phenomenal life on the outside. It looked amazing. I had, I say 2.5 kids. I had, my stepson, my son, and a French bulldog, which is like a 3-year-old toddler.
Always the animals, eh? Always. I
Always.
love that.
Absolutely. An amazing partner. I've had lots of not awesome experiences in the past. And so I had an amazing partner, a beautiful home that I owned, and nice car, great job, ego very, very well fed,
Yeah.
very well fed. Um, and was like, but what's my purpose?
Oh, yes.
What's my truth? Is this it?
Mhm.
Like, I just like, this is it.
Wow.
And I felt bad. I felt so terrible for even asking that question.
Yes.
And so there's just a sense of like, I love everything about my life, but it doesn't feel full. And
Yes.
so, my own coaches and my spiritual director were like, you should be coaching. And I was like,
Wow.
oh no. And they're like, pardon? I'm like, no, that's not an acceptable
Yes.
job. It's like it's
What?
100%. I was like, no, yeah,
Yes.
no, thanks, but no thanks. And they were like, and
Wow.
I made really, really good money, so it was hard to leave my work. And they're like,
Yes.
you coach already. That's everything you do. You coach every client that walks in. I had lighting showrooms, and I was like, no, like I literally did couples counseling with every single couple that was in building a house, like, because they all need it. And
Yes.
so I was like, oh my gosh. And then what happened was 7 years ago, I was in two car accidents,
Oh
6 days
my.
apart at work. And yeah, 2.5 years or 7.5 years ago now. And I had what they call concurrent concussion. So individually, I probably would have healed quicker, like within, 3 to 6 months from them. But
Yes.
because they were so close together, it dysregulated my nervous system. And every time I'd go into work, within 30 minutes, it would look like I was having a stroke. And all of a sudden, I couldn't work. And it took me 6 months to let go of that job, and they put me on permanent disability.
Yes.
And I wouldn't say I was suicidal. I was definitely at the dark edge of where like, what's the point and who am I
Yes.
now?
Yes.
And so it became the great identity crisis.
Wow.
And because I was such a workaholic and a driver, I got my doctors to agree I could do like schooling from home, so self-paced. So I did like all of
Yes.
my training in coaching. So I was like, all right, well, now's the time. And so I did my training and coaching with an international school. And then so I did all of that. And then my doctors were like, meditate. So I got into meditate. Well, I didn't believe them because I thought it was woo-woo. I was very Western medicine,
Yes.
Western science. And so I was like, just fix it. Like, just fix the
Yes.
brain. Like, what's the problem here? And
Yes.
so I kept looking for somebody that was competent.
Mm.
And it turns out it was going to have to be me. And so I was like, all right. And so my doctor signed off on me taking training in the science of mindful awareness.
Wow.
And yeah. And so by a neuroscientist. So then I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're using to heal PTSD. And I had no idea yet that I had complex PTSD. And I didn't know most of my diagnoses that were coming in behind the scenes from the neuropsychologists and all
Yes.
these specialists. And they're like, oh yeah, she's gonna a solid 2 years is what they gave me before I would heal if
Wow.
I let go. And
Oh,
I was a triple A type personality with a control freak
yes.
tendencies. And I was like, no, I feel like I could beat that. And they're like, you're going to make it longer. And
Mm.
I'm like, no. And so it was a long journey. And so about a year in to it, I read a book. Somebody had recommended a book by Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul.
Yes.
Loved the book, helped me with Who Am I? Great book. I love, some people have it difficult with it. I think it's a great book. I make most of my clients end up reading
Mm.
it. And then his second book was his memoir, which was The Surrender Experiment.
Oh my word.
And yeah, and it broke my heart wide open
Mm.
at the beauty of the opportunities that our life has if we
Yes.
stopped trying to control and we co-created. And so
Exactly.
I made the decision to do a surrender experiment. And my life would get really, really weird. So books would arrive
That's
on my
well said.
phone. Oh yeah. Dark night of the soul. I
Yes.
was still not, you couldn't say the word God in front of me without a physical flinch. I was
Wow.
kicked out of church at 15 years old. I was told that I was a devil, that I was a terrible person. So I was like, if there's a God, he's forgotten about me. That was very much my belief.
Wow.
When I was 18, I was married to a man that ended up being a sociopath. And so I was tortured for 2 years until I escaped and went to hiding. I'd lost 5 pregnancies, 5 children. Um, yeah, it was a lot. Like there was a lot of darkness in there. And so I just didn't believe. And so all of a sudden, here I'm on this surrender experiment. I'm open to it because he's like a Jewish yogi that loves Jesus Christ, is how he defines himself. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like there's options. We don't have to roll one way. And so I
Yes.
just started to study. And so I'd wake up and it'd be like, you need to read the Course in Miracles. And I'd be like, what? And I couldn't read. My eyes were all janked up. And so I would sit down at the table and I'd open up the Course in Miracles. And if I was doing one of the courses, I could see the sentence I was reading clear as day and everything else would be blurry.
Wow.
And my husband's like, this is wild. And I mean, they would do tests and my eyes were shaking. They weren't like they were
Yes.
wandering on their own. Like there's no way. And he was like, this is crazy. Books would arrive on my phone. Carolyn Mace. That was the first book, Advanced Energy Anatomy. So books changed my life. They saved my life every
Yes.
step of the way. It was always a book. And
Incredible.
yeah, and then I didn't want to listen to Carolyn Mace.
Mm.
And I didn't want to do energy medicine. And I was
Yes.
like, why are you making me read this? But it would lead me, down the path of understanding co-creation. It would lead me
Yes.
into energy medicine. I got into emotion code, body code, shaman work, training when in shadow work, and became a person that my school within my work, I do energy mastery. And
Okay.
it's not that I'm an energy master, it's that I channel and I teach you how to become your energy master. And
Yes.
so, everything's about
Yes.
teaching people how to find themselves again. Everything's there. And so, yeah. And then it was like, you're going to write a book. I had been nudged to write a book 3 years before I got hurt about
Okay.
my story. And I
Wow.
was like, who would listen? Like, why
Mm.
would anybody read that? I'm nobody. And so I ignored it. I ignored a lot of life's nudges.
Yes.
And yeah. And so then all of a sudden the accident happened and I was doing this shamanic training and shadow work. And all of a sudden my teacher was like, I'm going to take a 6 months off. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess we're done working together right now. I must have everything I need at this moment. And then
Yes.
literally the next day, my one of my girlfriends calls me and she's like, "Look, would you just do this best-selling book boot camp with me,
Yes.
with my coach?" And I'm
Oh,
like, "I'm so busy." And she's
yes.
like, "Please." And it just happened like everything canceled on my schedule so I could do
Yes.
the hour every morning. And I
That's
was like, "All right."
amazing.
That's weird. And I'm a skeptic. I'm a
Yes.
skeptic about people. I'm a skeptic about my own work, which makes it really fun to do.
Mm.
I am a skeptic. And so I started doing this boot camp with my coach, Sarah Connell. And I ended up signing up for her VIP because I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, huh, all right,
Yes.
I'll do your VIP. So I asked her one question, which was, everybody tells me I should write a book, and this is
Mm.
what they're saying. And she asked me questions. What do you do with your life? What do you want the book to bring you? Blah, 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 blah. I answered, she was like, nope, that's not your first book, is not your memoir. Your first book is that. And then it was Let
Yes.
Go or Be Dragged. And I was like, oh. And then she was like, and here's all of this information and how to write it. And I was like, okay. And she gave such great value for free that I was
Yes.
like, I'm in. So by that weekend, I
Yes.
signed up with her as a coach and ended up, so she does coaching for writing books and speaking on TEDx's
Amazing.
and doing business. And so I signed up with her and ended up moving up and moving with her through Oracle. And so yeah, that was kind of the inspiration. And I still didn't write, that? I still didn't write right away because she told me I had to be
Incredible.
visible.
Yes.
And I was invisible. I purposely was not on social media much. I was terrified of being ridiculed, of being
Yes.
persecuted. I was about to bring forward things like past lives, energy work,
Mm.
and your own development, personal empowerment, removing your power from systems like government,
Yes.
religion,
Oh,
medical.
wow.
So I'm not saying walk away. I'm
Yes.
saying take your power back.
Yes.
If you want to be part of a religion, great, love in it, but don't give your power to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You are a direct conduit to God. So
Mm.
do it because there's something there that is bringing you into a beautiful relationship, but don't do it because, and don't give your power away to it. That's not what we're meant to
Yes.
do.
Yes. Agree.
Maintain, right? So maintain and teach others how to
Absolutely.
maintain.
Yeah.
So yeah. So for people that want your
Mm.
power, I'm going to piss them all off.
Yes.
So
No,
I didn't want to be visible.
I love
Yeah.
that because there's a lot of takers. I mean, I talk of
Hmm.
everyone, that's the question. What do you want? Like for me,
Hmm.
before every podcast, before I ask, what is your divine will for this session, for this, because also I want to be in alignment more than anything and not take, for granted, anything basically, because that's not healthy. That's not a healthy place to be.
Oh, I love that so much. Every morning I wake up and my question is God, what is your dream for me today?
Yes. Love that.
And it's
Love that.
right. It reminds us to be in service.
Exactly. And Dawn, how do you feel about your new book, your
Mm,
baby? Are you
I
excited?
love her. I'm very excited. Yes, I'm very excited. It's been interesting, like studying like the principles of co-creation with Carolyn Mace again and going through like fate and
Wow.
destiny and going through these questions that have been 7.5 years in the making
Wow.
for the information coming in. So it's been pretty amazing. And then as we were talking about before, my editor was like, you need to use a story. What is your arc? Like what is the story, your own personal story? So rather than kind of the book being laid out where I kind of, this is who I am, my
Yes.
story, why you need to learn and what would happen if you didn't, and here's the tools. I instead made the decision to write my book as my stories kind of woven in each lesson, how I learned each of the principles. So all those people, I weave my story through it, and my overarching relationship through the
Yes.
book is the relationship with my mother.
Oh,
And
wow.
so how to heal um, an antagonist and an abusive relationship, learning. So, how do we do our healing work and how will it affect us?
Mhm.
And my mom has since gotten sick. So, she took a fall and has a hemorrhage in her brain. We don't know that she'll survive. But doing the book, doing
Mhm.
this book was an antagonist to do even the deeper levels. I'd done enough where I could have a
Yes.
conversation with her and not get mad and
Mhm.
do all those things. I could be functioning. um Still be slightly irritated by the time I left the house, but I could pull it off. This
Yes.
book and doing this work, um it gave me peace.
Yes, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
I really am sorry, your mom is so ill and, just
Yeah.
thoughts and prayers with her. And, like we said before we hopped on, it's the letting go. It really is the letting go of, the emotions of the story almost, of that it's hard. It's not an easy letting go.
Oh, and that's the thing that is most important, I think, for us is we think we need to hold on to these things because they keep us safe.
Yes,
They don't.
agree.
They hurt us.
Yeah.
They make us
And
sick and create disease.
exactly. And that's what I wanted to add as well, that it's you cling on to certain seasons or certain phases. I know, I mean, I'm that mother. My son's school jacket and in my new house since he moved a month ago is still like out of my closet for me to see his school jacket. No longer in school, he's going to university now. But you know, letting go is not easy, but I do agree with you. It's the clinging on that really hurts us long term.
Yes, I think we need to move through grief. It's funny because there's these 5 stages of grief, and there's a beautiful author that I've been in our coaching group, and she teaches on grief, or she coaches and counsels on it. She's like, I don't think she doesn't agree with the 5 stages.
Wow.
And she's been, yeah, which has been interesting. And I can see her points. Like, I'm like, you know what, you're right.
Mm.
And so I think, for some people, these 5 stages really work, but then there's another aspect. But I think for myself, going through it and going through it as an empty nest, as a mom, doing these different things, is we need to give ourselves the space to
Yes,
feel our grief.
agree.
When I sat with my mom in the hospital this weekend, she can't hear me or see me. It's not like a coma, it's very different. And I got to finally say to her, like, it's okay.
Yes,
It's beyond forgiveness. This isn't like, I wasn't like, I forgive you, which is in some ways a little passive aggressive.
yes.
It was more like, it's okay, we're good. We're
Oh,
good. Our
that's
contracts are done.
beautiful.
So
Yes.
if you want to live, fight.
Mhm. Mm.
Fight. And I will be here with you every step of the way. If you're done,
Mm.
it's okay. You're free.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I'm really sorry, just. And also the timing, like we mentioned,
mm,
it's your book launch. It's
yeah.
and
But it
for
felt good to be able to say that. There's no resentment. There's no anger anymore.
yes.
And there was, based on, I was sitting with my friends telling stories about my childhood, stories like memories that, of course, come up as soon as this stuff happens. And I'm
Yes.
like, oh my God, like
Mhm.
this is not a healthy relationship.
Yes.
And yet, all I could see was compassion for her and sadness
That's amazing.
that, she didn't do all of her healing work. But, I can see where she was insecure and where, and it
Yes.
doesn't mean that it's okay what she did, but it just is what it is. I mean, it's
Yes.
loving what is. That is what it was. And we have a contract, and
Yeah.
I
And
asked
it's
for her to
also
be
the
my mom, and
exact, and it's the experience at the end of the
yeah,
day, from both sides. It's definitely something
yeah.
I'm also working on in my life personally, is to see both sides from my end as well. It takes two to tango, overall, if you think of every narrative, every relationship in our life, good or bad, it's all experiences at the end of the day. And I do want to ask you, Dawn, for our listeners tuning in today, who has to let go of seasons. We're in a new year, we're in a new season. What advice would you give them?
Hmm. Every year I pick a word. So lots of people do this. I learned it from John Maxwell, I'm sure, reading his books, and I love picking a word, and I let that word kind of guide me through it. I think first that we need to understand that life is cyclical. And
Yes,
so as a new season, it's always going to shift and change, but opportunities never pass us by.
that's
And I
wonderful.
think that's a mistake. A lot of people think like, oh, I missed
Yes.
that opportunity. If you're alive, you haven't.
Mm,
It may be the package will change
yes.
and the story of it will change, but the opportunity hasn't been lost yet. So, I would say like do the work. Is it
Yes.
going to hurt? Yes.
Mm,
Will it be better? Yes.
mm,
Yeah, it will be. I don't like crying. I
yes.
don't like being I don't like being weak, as I've seen it. But then at the same time, there's like a real beauty in when we finally let
Yes.
go.
Exactly.
What's holding you back right now? What are you fighting
Yes.
right now? I always think of that tug of war on a rope. You're
Yes.
on one
Yes.
side and you're holding this rope, and life's on the other side, or other people, could be family members, whoever, and you're like all worried about how are my hands placed, where are my feet placed, am I on
Exactly.
the right angle, you know and I'm beside you going, let go. And it's like, you're
Oh,
like, oh, but I can't, because then and I'm
yes.
let go. And the moment you let the rope go, everything else falls, and you're
Gosh,
saying,
don't make me cry.
right.
It's beautiful.
Now I also say leave the jacket out for a bit.
Yes.
Let yourself move through the layers of feeling, and you'll know the day where you look at it and go, oh, sweet pea, and you'll, love on the jacket, give it a hug, and hang it back up. And
Exactly.
but do it like not as a cling. Like we look at it, we go, okay, and you'll know the moment when it's
Yes.
really not serving you. Right now, it's allowing you to move through a stage of grief, of a change of
Yes.
identity.
It really
Once it's
is.
time,
Yes.
note when it actually is holding you back. So be
100%.
honest with yourself. Where am I today? Is
Exactly.
this
And it
serving
is
me?
to sit. It is to sit and acknowledge what we're letting go. Because sometimes I think in life we just push, and that's not good. It's just go from the one thing to the other without really sitting with your grief, sitting with your moment of what you have to let go.
Whatever that is, like you said,
Yes.
like, we are a changing season. So for a lot of, women, with my clients, yes, a lot of them are, kids moving out, kids changing, life changing, a lot going through divorce. Who am I if I'm not a wife, if I'm not, you know, a mom with kids at home? Well, now you're a mom with kids not at home. But we need to change that. For me, it was like, who am I if I'm not a lighting, specialist? That my nickname was the lighting goddess. So like I said,
Oh,
ego well fed.
wow.
I was, super mom. I
Yes.
coached hockey. I was at every,
Oh,
game.
wow.
He was, oh yeah. And then I was like, the Uber wife, baked every night, made dinner. And then I still worked
Yes.
60 day hours. It was over the top. But
Wow.
all of those things were an identity. And when I got hurt, they were all gone. I
Yes.
couldn't,
Wow.
my husband left for work one day and I was making myself a smoothie. And when he left, I had a lemon on the counter and I was cutting the lemon for my smoothie. And he headed off for work. And then he came back and I was standing at the counter trying to figure out what direction to cut the lemon to make my smoothie. And I was like, oh, what'd you forget? And he's like, nothing.
Wow.
And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I'm done work for the day. And for 8 hours, I tried to figure out how to cut a lemon.
Mm.
So
Mm.
there was nothing left.
Sure.
And, your personality's still there. I had a neurologist that was like, yeah, you're
Yes.
still an A-type personality and you're still a control freak. Just not as like intellectually driven one as you were before.
Yes.
And it takes time. It takes time to
Wow.
move through these things, but everybody's going to be different and the identity,
Yes.
the season's different. But honor it. It's not always summer. And there's beauties to winter, stews, curling up with a blanket, turning on a fireplace, reading a good novel. Like,
Yes. I love
I have to
that.
remind myself, I love winter. I
Yes.
love that I have to be less productive because
Yes.
it's winter.
No, no,
And
I
then
agree
dry
with
in summer.
you. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
we go-getters. So you're so used to driving and to be almost in masculine energy if we have to, also, and it can hurt
Yep.
you. It really can hurt you if you are, like you said, over the top. And I can associate with that so, so, so much. And I do want to ask you, Dawn, for our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? Where can they find you on social media to follow your absolute wonderful path that you are on?
Thank you so much. So the book's just launching and it'll be available on Amazon. You can check your local bookstores, as well as my website. So my website is practicalspiritualismco.com. And that will also is where all of the pieces for the book are in there as well. I've made a separate page so that people can get all of the meditations and the workbooks and sheets for themselves. And then we're going to be moving on to Audible as well for the book, which is, I'm really excited because I Audible a lot of books. So I love Audible. And
Yes.
then the podcast, Spotify and that. And then also on socials, my socials, I'm under both Dawn Elgin as well as Practical Spiritualism and YouTube. I do a lot on YouTube. I have free meditations on there, free guides. I talk kind of through the things I'm going through. Yeah, and those are probably the big ones. And then on Facebook, I do have a community, a free community, which is the Awakening Circle. And that's a place where anybody can come and join us. And it is a private group. So you can talk openly without fears of, family or friends seeing what you're asking questions about, especially when we're, curious about ourselves, past lives, our spirituality. What does this mean? Where am I at? So we talk openly and give pieces there.
That's absolutely incredible. And I do hope you'll be visiting me soon again for a
I would love
follow-up.
to.
There's so much to unpack here. And I do want to honor you, Dawn, for being incredibly brave and for being an example of letting go. I just get that in my mind the whole time, let go, and then the D at the end. Let go and let God. You know that, but it's like
Yes.
there's something so sacred in letting go as well. So thank you so much for reminding us about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
For everyone who tuned in today, what an honor to have Dawn here. I hope that you are also reminded that there is something very, very special in the letting go. It's not always easy, but that's the only way we grow. It's the only way we can really move forward, and also honoring what we let go, as a recently empty nester, etc. It's not always easy, but to honor the seasons and to grow with that. Keep on writing, keep on shining, and keep on letting go.
Just watch me shine.